It's strange how silence can feel louder in a crowded room, how laughter in the background can feel like thunder rolling against your chest, how something as simple as saying hi can feel like walking barefoot on broken glass. If you've ever stood in a room full of people, heart racing, wondering if everyone can hear your thoughts, you already know what social anxiety feels like. It's not fear of people, not really. It's fear of being seen and misunderstood at the same time. See, social anxiety isn't just shyness or introversion. It's not about preferring quiet nights or avoiding small talk. It's a psychological experience that lives deep in the nervous system, a constant battle between wanting connection and fearing judgment. The paradox is painful. You crave belonging, but the very thought of being noticed makes your body tighten, like it's preparing for danger. You want to speak, but your voice hides behind your ribs. Psychologists describe it as an excessive fear of negative evaluation, the mind constantly scanning for signs of rejection. The brain interprets harmless social cues as threats. A glance, a pause, a shift in tone. Suddenly, your thoughts spiral. Did I say something wrong? Do they think I'm weird? Maybe I should have stayed quiet. That's the inner dialogue of someone living with social anxiety. A constant, invisible conversation with themselves that never really stops. What's happening underneath is fascinating and heartbreaking at once. Research shows that the amygdala, the brain's fear center, becomes hyperactive in people with social anxiety. That means the brain fires off warning signals even in safe situations. A simple interaction can feel like standing under a spotlight, every gesture amplified, every word magnified. It's not your fault. It's your biology trying to protect you from rejection, because to the brain, rejection feels like danger. But here's what most people don't understand. Social anxiety isn't always obvious. It doesn't always look like trembling hands or stuttered words. Sometimes it looks like a perfect smile, rehearsed responses, and nodding along while your mind is begging to escape. It looks like cancelling plans you were excited for. It looks like replaying conversations in your head long after they're over. It's the quiet exhaustion of performing normalcy every day. And yet, beneath all of it, there's an incredible sensitivity. People with social anxiety often notice details others miss. Tone changes, micro-expressions, subtle emotional shifts in a room. They have an emotional radar that's too good for its own good. They read between lines, feel beneath words, and carry every emotion they sense. That's not weakness. That's awareness turned inward until it burns. The roots of social anxiety are complex. Sometimes it's genetic. Studies show it can run in families tied to both temperament and brain chemistry. Sometimes it's learned. Growing up in environments where you felt judged, criticized, or unsafe to express yourself can wire the brain to associate people with pain. For some, it's the product of repeated humiliation or failure. For others, it's subtle. Years of being told to just be confident until you started believing that something was wrong with you for struggling. And when those experiences accumulate, something profound happens. You begin to develop what psychologists call self-focused attention. Your awareness turns inward. You stop experiencing the world. You start monitoring how the world is experiencing you. You become hyper-aware of your own body, your expressions, your words, your movements. Every gesture feels like it's under surveillance, and every silence feels like proof that you've said too much or too little. It's not vanity, it's vigilance. Social anxiety, at its core, is the fear of exposure. Not physical exposure, emotional exposure. It's the fear that if people saw you as you really are, they might not accept you. That's why it's not cured by surface-level advice like, be confident, or stop caring what others think. Those phrases don't touch the depth of what's happening, because people with social anxiety already know, logically, that no one's thinking about them that much. But logic doesn't calm the nervous system. When the body believes it's in danger, reason becomes irrelevant. So what do you do when your own body becomes your battlefield? When your voice shakes in moments that should feel natural? When your silence gets mistaken for arrogance? When the effort to be normal becomes an act of survival? Here's something that often surprises people. Social anxiety isn't always a flaw. Sometimes it's an overdeveloped form of empathy. Your brain has learned to care too much about how others feel, to anticipate their reactions before they even speak. You've been conditioned to avoid causing discomfort, so you end up absorbing it instead. And in that process, you lose your own sense of ease. But there's beauty in this too, because that same sensitivity that makes you anxious in crowds can make you extraordinary in connection. You notice emotions that others ignore. You sense what people need before they ask. You feel the world more vividly, more intimately. And while that depth can hurt, it's also what makes your compassion real. Still, it's hard, really hard, to live in a mind that never lets you rest, to rehearse every conversation before it happens, and replay every moment after it ends, to feel like you're living in the echo of your own self-consciousness. And the cruel irony is that the more you try to control it, the louder it gets. The moment you try to suppress anxiety, your brain interprets that suppression as more danger. So you get stuck in a loop, afraid of fear itself. There's an old psychological principle called the paradox of control. It says that the harder you try to control an internal state, the more uncontrollable it becomes. That's why telling yourself to calm down rarely works. The solution isn't control, it's understanding. It's learning to recognize the sensations without obeying them. It's learning to notice your racing heart, your sweaty palms, your spiraling thoughts, and to say, "This is my body protecting me, not betraying me." Therapists often use techniques like exposure therapy or cognitive behavioral therapy for social anxiety. These methods don't erase the fear, they retrain the brain to reinterpret it. Through gradual exposure, you teach yourself that social situations are safe, that your worth isn't dependent on performance, that silence doesn't mean rejection, and stumbling doesn't mean failure. It's not about becoming fearless. It's about learning that fear doesn't have to define your identity. What's powerful about social anxiety is how it mirrors one of the most human desires of all, the desire to belong. Every nervous heartbeat, every awkward silence, every overthought sentence, they all trace back to one truth: you want to connect. And connection, ironically, is the very thing social anxiety makes most difficult. That's why healing it isn't just psychological, it's spiritual in a way. Because to overcome it, you have to learn to be seen, fully, imperfectly, and without apology. You have to risk being misunderstood in order to finally be understood. You see, social anxiety is not just a disorder of fear, it's a disorder of self-perception. Somewhere along the way, the mirror between who you are and how you think others see you became distorted. You began to believe that your value is measured by approval, that your presence must always be justified, that you must never inconvenience anyone with your existence. And so you shrink yourself, you speak softly, you fade into the background, until one day you look around and realize you've built a life so small it no longer fits your soul. But here's what's remarkable. Every single person with social anxiety has a moment, maybe quiet, maybe sudden, when they get tired of hiding, when they realize that the cost of being unseen is far greater than the fear of being judged. And that's the moment change begins. Not through force, not through pretending to be confident, but through gentle self-compassion. The truth is, the most confident people in the world aren't fearless. They just stopped fighting their fear. They learn to carry it with grace, to let their anxiety exist without letting it lead. And if you're someone who struggles with this, know that your anxiety doesn't make you broken. It makes you aware, it makes you human. And that awareness, painful as it feels, can become your greatest teacher. Because once you begin to understand your mind, you also begin to reclaim it. You start noticing that the world isn't as harsh as your inner voice suggests, that people aren't analyzing you nearly as much as you think. That silence isn't judgment. Sometimes it's peace. And that the small, trembling voice you hide might be the one someone else desperately needs to hear. There's something quietly heroic about living with social anxiety, because even though it doesn't always look dramatic, it's a daily act of courage. Every time you walk into a room, every time you speak up even when your throat tightens, every time you stay present despite your heart pounding. That's bravery in its purest form. The world celebrates loud confidence, but it forgets that silent endurance is its own kind of strength. See, people with social anxiety are often some of the most introspective thinkers you'll ever meet. They spend so much time observing, watching how people move, how they speak, how emotions shift like weather, that they develop a quiet, almost philosophical depth. They understand human behavior not from books, but from lived experience, because they've analyzed every tiny detail of social interaction, not out of curiosity, but out of survival. And in doing so, they've gained a kind of wisdom about people that few others have. But that same awareness can become a cage. When you're constantly reading the room, you forget to feel the room. You become a scientist of emotion, but not a participant. You spend so much time managing perception that you lose touch with authenticity. That's why healing social anxiety isn't just about reducing fear. It's about rediscovering your natural self beneath the layers of self-protection. Imagine this, a child playing in the park, laughing without checking who's watching. That's what freedom used to feel like before anxiety learned your name. Social anxiety, in many ways, is the memory of emotional danger. It's your mind saying, "Don't let that happen again." But healing begins when you realize you're no longer that child who needed to hide. You're safe now, and your voice deserves to exist without apology. One of the most liberating realizations is that social anxiety doesn't mean you're antisocial. In fact, most people who struggle with it are deeply social. They just carry too much empathy. They think too deeply about the ripple effects of their words. They imagine every possible reaction, every potential discomfort they could cause. It's not that they don't want to connect, it's that they want to connect perfectly. And perfection kills connection. Because people don't bond over flawlessness. They bond over honesty, vulnerability, and shared imperfection. When you start to embrace that truth, something shifts. You stop trying to impress people and start trying to feel them instead. You stop rehearsing what you'll say and begin to listen. And strangely, the less you perform, the more people trust you, because real presence, quiet, imperfect, unpolished, is magnetic. Social anxiety often teaches people to overanalyze themselves, but self-awareness, when balanced, is a gift. It allows you to reflect, to empathize, to grow. The key is learning to shift that awareness from self-criticism to self-observation. Instead of asking, "What's wrong with me?" ask, "What's happening inside me right now?" That small change turns shame into curiosity, and curiosity is the opposite of fear. Let's talk about the science for a moment. In people with social anxiety, researchers have found increased activity not just in the amygdala, the fear center, but also in the medial prefrontal cortex, the area involved in self-referential thinking. That means your brain literally keeps putting you at the center of every social equation. It's like being stuck under a spotlight, even when no one's looking. Therapeutic approaches like mindfulness and acceptance-based therapy help by turning that spotlight outward, by reminding you that not every silence means judgment, and not every expression means rejection. Sometimes people are just lost in their own thoughts, just like you, but you can't reason your way out of anxiety. It's not a logic problem, it's a nervous system pattern. That's why healing starts with the body. Slow breathing, grounding, gentle exposure. They all retrain your body to associate social moments with safety instead of danger. When the body calms, the mind follows. And when the mind quiets, connection becomes possible again. Still, progress isn't linear. There will be days when you speak freely, and days when your voice trembles again. Days when you surprise yourself with courage, and days when you cancel plans just to breathe. That's okay. Healing isn't the absence of fear, it's the presence of choice. You may still feel the anxiety, but it no longer makes your decisions for you. And something else happens along the way. Your empathy, which once felt like a burden, becomes your strength. Because once you've known what it feels like to be invisible, you'll never let others feel unseen. Once you've known the weight of silence, you'll listen differently. And once you've known the pain of rejection, you'll move through the world with kindness that feels like sunlight. That's what social anxiety hides beneath its surface. A heart that cares too much, and a spirit that feels too deeply. There's a quiet revolution happening in how psychology understands conditions like this. For a long time, the focus was on fixing what's wrong. Now it's about uncovering what's right within the struggle. That shift matters, because when you stop seeing yourself as broken, you start growing again. Social anxiety isn't a flaw in your personality. It's a byproduct of a nervous system that loved safety too much. It means your mind once believed that blending in was the only way to survive. But you're not meant to blend in forever. You're meant to bloom, even if it's slow, even if it's quiet. The process often begins with small acts of defiance. Not dramatic changes, but subtle rebellions against fear. Making eye contact a second longer than usual. Speaking even when your heart says stay silent. Allowing a pause in conversation without rushing to fill it. Those moments don't look heroic from the outside, but they are. They are proof that you're choosing presence over protection. And over time, those tiny victories rewire your brain. You begin to trust yourself again. And when that trust builds, anxiety starts losing its power. But here's something few people talk about. When the anxiety fades, there can be an emptiness too. Because for so long, it defined you. Who are you without it? What happens when silence is no longer suffocating, but serene? That's the part of healing that feels both beautiful and strange. You start to realize that anxiety never erased who you were. It only covered you. And beneath all the self-doubt, you were always someone worth knowing. People often assume social anxiety means you dislike others. But the truth is, you often love people too much. You imagine their disappointment before it even happens. You carry their potential judgments before they're ever spoken. You live in their minds before you live in your own. That's the tragedy and the beauty of a heart that wants to be accepted so badly it forgets it already is. And that's the final step in understanding social anxiety. Realizing that acceptance starts within. The same compassion you extend to others, the patience, the understanding, the forgiveness, must finally be given to yourself. Because you are not just a collection of anxious moments. You are the quiet persistence behind every one of them. You are the person who shows up even when your hands shake. You are the human being who still hopes, still tries, still dreams of belonging. One day, the anxiety will feel like an echo instead of a storm. You'll walk into a room and your body won't brace for impact. You'll speak and the words will sound like they belong to you. And when silence fills the space afterward, it won't feel heavy anymore. It will feel like peace. You won't need to analyze every gesture because you'll have learned the most important truth of all. That you were never being judged as harshly as you judged yourself. And maybe, in that realization, you'll finally feel something that social anxiety once stole from you. Ease. The ease of being seen and not performing. The ease of existing without apology. The ease of knowing that your worth was never something to prove, only something to remember. So if you're listening to this right now, take a breath. You've spent years fighting a battle no one else could see, but you're still here, still trying, still learning to speak even when your voice shakes. And that's what makes you remarkable. Because courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's a whisper saying, "I'll try again tomorrow." And sometimes that whisper is enough to change everything.